Leblanc from the University of Miami, and Professor Leblanc has already had the opportunity to come to Morocco for the third time, and Professor Leblanc has been also the supervisor of many foreign students, including Morocco, and some of them are here today. And by his great scientific expertise, recognized internationally, and his human quality, Dr. Leblanc has always maintained that flame that drives grit and eternal friendship with his students. So some of his students, as I say, are present with us. So thank you, Dr. Leblanc, for in the name of those students that are here, and of the name of all those who was in your laboratory. Thank you. I will pass to my colleague Mabrouki to present the CV of Dr. Leblanc.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. For me also, I want to thank Dr. Leblanc for accepting all these students, Moroccan students, in his laboratory in Canada and also in the USA. I'm glad to introduce him and to say some words about his activities. Roger Mondreneau Leblanc received his bachelor in chemistry in 1964 from University of Laval, Canada, and PhD in physical chemistry in 1968 from the same university. From 1968 to 1970, he was a postdoctoral fellow in the laboratory of Prof. George Porter in Davy Faraday Research Lab in the Royal Institution of Great Britain. He was professor from 1970 to 1993 in Arts Chemistry Department and Biology in University of Quebec at Trois-Rivières in Canada. During his period, he was chair from 1971 to 1975 at the same department, and director from 1981 to 1991 at Photobiophysics Research Center. In 1994, he moved to University of Miami, where he has been a professor at the Department of Chemistry since then to present. At University of Miami, he was chair of Department of Chemistry from 1994 until 2002, and he is appointed as chair from 2013 to present. He was also one of three editors of Colloid and Surface B biointerface from 1998 to 2013. During his early career as a scientist, his research interest was on the photosynthesis and photoconductivity using surface chemistry and spectroscopy. His current research interest is to apply two-dimensional surface chemistry combined with the spectroscopy and microscopy to investigate the property of nanomaterials, carbon dot, graphene oxide, and quantum dot, and the fibrillation process of amylogenic protein like insulin, peptide, polypeptide. He also interested to design and develop biosensors with high sensitivity and selectivity for disease diagnostic. He has published around 500 articles in peer-reviewed journals. As a professor, he has supervised 47 PhD students. He excuse me if I forget some words about him, and I will thank you, Dr. Leblanc, from all of the students, Moroccan students, And I give
Allez, à vous la parole, Dr. Leblanc, pour la présentation.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation. When my good friends, ex-graduate students, are telling that I have done a lot of publications, the reason is because of them. Because we published quite a lot of papers with Morocco students, and it was always great to have him in my team all the time. Now, I would like to really thank very sincerely the in this country, believe me. So, why I have chosen carbon dust in this presentation? This is linked to the fact that there has been discovery of carbon dust is only recent, it's 2004, 2005, and the application is huge, really huge, but only just the beginning. As an example for that dielectric, I would say measurements related to dielectric materials, we have only 2 or 3 papers published, 2 in 2015. So the field of research is really, really important. So this is what I will present. I think it would be better for me to be down because I cannot see the screen. So first of all, in terms of outline, I will talk about the background of carbon nanomaterials. We have 0 dimension, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, preparation characterization of 2 types of carbon dust, smart gel-like and prepared from carbon powder. Application are completely different. And finally, carbon dust for dielectric material. This is quite, I would say, small study because, as I said, there are only 2 papers published in 2015. And finally, I will summarize my talk. What is very important when we think about carbon dust, this is reproducibility. You know that everybody will doing science. If we are not able to reproduce it, we have a bad shape. So that's very, very important to, first of all, to prepare, but also to characterize it. We spend a lot of time, I would say, for characterization. So before I go to this preparation characterization, first of all, to give you an idea about the type of carbon nanomaterials we have. First, we have 0 dimension. For example, filtering carbon dust also is 0 dimension. We have the 1 dimension. Some of you are looking for the dielectric properties are using carbon nanotube. And we can see the transmission between microscopy of carbon dust and the carbon nanotube. And saying that if we think about 2 dimensions, this is very well known now since 2004, when we use a Scotch tape, using relative to HOPG, and we're able to discover graphene. And if you oxidize graphene, we have graphene oxide with many functional groups. And at the moment, there are many papers published on the characterization and second reaction between the different groups of the graphene oxide. And usually this is used now for drug delivery because the thickness is only 1 nanometer or 10 angstrom, but the size is really large. This is micron size. So that means we can accommodate on this size, we can accommodate a lot of molecules. So we have done quite a lot of work with graphene oxide recently. Now let's go back to our interest, which is related to carbon dust. And the main point for carbon dust is excitation dependent. What I mean is, if we excite a specific wavelength, the emission will be a specific wavelength. But you change the excitation wavelength, you have an emission other wavelength. That means that if we have any cells and we look at the cell imaging, so depending on the excitation wavelength, you have different emission. That's a property that this is exciting. You don't have it for fluorophore, classical fluorophore, or if you want, for quantum dust, as an example. So the second point, which is very important for those who are working in biomedical science research, is this biocompatibility and low cytotoxicity. Why? Because we are made of carbon, so of course it is biocompatible. We don't have a problem. For those who knows about quantum dust, as you know, we use all the time cadmium, selenium, cadmium, tellurium. Cadmium is toxic. So that's the reason now you have a lot of scientists who move from the quantum dust to the carbon dust. So saying that the optical stability is very, very important. So you can keep your carbon dust for months without any degradation of your system. And of course, there are many applications, as I just said, biomedicine, sensors, catalysts, and of course, optics or photonics. And again, as I said to you, for dielectric, not much done up to now, so the field is quite open. So that's for the background of carbon dust. So saying that, if we look about this, how can we do this synthesis? So there are two ways. One way is the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. Top-down is related to any, I would say, large system. You can, I would say, oxidize it. You can use a thermal effect, and you can get at the end carbon dust. The last paper I read maybe a month ago, they used banana. In banana at 100 degrees centigrade for a few hours. At the end, when you can do the extraction of the carbon dust. So any product, I mean, which has fruits, for example, you will produce at the end of the day carbon dust. Another methodology is to use the laser ablation technique, but you need the laser to do it. So there are much more simple molecules you can use. For the bottom-up approach, for example, if you use the glucose, the glycerol, citric acid, with amine, and you heat it to again 100 to 200 degrees centigrade, you will produce the carbon dust. So two ways, top-down or bottom-up approach. These two approaches are used. Many works has been published for the last 5 years on the preparation. Now, as a reviewer, when I see a paper saying that, oh, we have a new preparation, it is not accepted for publication. It's too many now. So we have to go on the characterization and application at the moment. So saying that in terms of synthesis of carbon dust, this is our own, I would say, work that we have done. And this is new in a way that using, as I just said to you, for the bottom-up approach, using citric acid with thelembamine, so heating at 160 degrees centigrade for 50 minutes. And of course, you have to use the carbon to eliminate any more oxidation of your product, which is carbon dust. You will produce, on the regular light, for example, a gel formation. We're very surprised. Why? Because for this molecular it's very important. 1 citric acid for 14 thelembamine. So you can do this preparation in any lab. There is no difficulty. There is no trick to produce it. So we're surprised why? Because this gel is a high viscous, you can see high viscous liquid, but still this is the organogel. And if you irradiate with 365 nanometer length, of course you will see the fluorescence of your carbon dust. Quantum yield, we measure quantum yield, and this is around 37% quantum yield, which is quite high. So preparation, fine. What about characterization? And as I said to you, we have done quite a lot of work on this question of characterization. First of all, the UV is we have always the N-pi transition band and also the pi-pi transition band into UV. Second, which is the most important, the fluorescence work. Again, when we excite at 250, that's easier to use this graph. If you have pigment formation in your goes in your blood, that's really that may cause fibrillation in the brain. That means there's heart disease. So that's the reason why it is important to work on the insulin fibrillation. And what is the way to do it? The way to do it is to look the fibrillate formation using tau-flavin T. That's a chromophore that interact with the fibrillars. So if it interact with the fibrillars, that means that when we start time of incubation for insulin with at 65 degrees centigrade, we have 0.1 mole sodium chloride, pH 1.6, and different concentration of carbon dust. So when we don't have any carbon dust, we see after 2 hours and a half, fibrillate formation up to saturation. At this point, there is a lot of fibrillate formation. When we add to the solution 0.2 microgram per milliliter, we can see that there is a delay for the formation of the fibrils. If we put a value of 2 microgram, again the delay is 6 hours before to see fibrillate formation. And finally 10 microgram per milliliter, we have to wait 12 hours. So truly the carbon dust really will inhibit the insulin fibrillation formation. We have done the same type of work with polypeptides 140, 142, which is related to Alzheimer's disease, and we see also the fibrillation, which is stopped using the carbon dust. So that means that if we correlate what we just said with the AFM images, we can see that A, B, C, and D correspond to different concentration of the carbon dust, identical to the previous slide. And if you look in terms of the y-axis for 0, 2, 2.5, and 5 hours, when we don't have any carbon dust, and you compare with this scheme D with value of 10 microgram per milliliter in the solution. So in this particular case, 0, 7, 12 hours, we don't see any fibril formation. And you can see without any carbon dust, we see fibril after 5 hours. We have to wait 14 hours to see fibril. So there is correlation between what we just said about tau flavin T and the AFM measurements. We can correlate also with the secular dipolase, and we can see incubation times between 0 and 1.2 hours. So again, if we use a very high concentration of carbon dust, 40 micrograms, to see something really you need 144 hours. So the last two experimental evidence show that really we start fibril formation using the carbon dust. So this slide shows that, let's suppose I have fibril now, and I put carbon dust. The question is, carbon dust interact with the fibrils, or carbon dust interact with the monomer? So when we don't have any carbon dust, it takes 2.5 hours before to see the formation. If we add carbon dust at the beginning, it takes 12 hours. Now, if we already, for 1 hour, we have fibrils, and we add carbon dust, it takes 6 hours before to see fibril formation. If we have some fibril after 2 hours, you see the lag here is only 1 hour. Bottom line is carbon dust interact with really the monomer, but not the fibrils. That's what we can show with these experiments. So possible interaction, hydrophobic interaction, hydrogen bonding, and of course the van der Waals might be a possibility also. We propose for the mechanism that the insulin species is absorbed on the surface of carbon dust. I have my carbon dust and insulin surrounded. So that means there is no way to produce fibril. That's the mechanism that we propose at the moment. So that's the first application. What about the blood-brain barrier? Knowing that the idea is to see, is it possible to introduce in the brain carbon dust? Because if we think about Parkinson, this is related to alpha-synuclein protein. If you think Alzheimer's disease, this is related to 140, 142 polypeptides. Fine. They are fibril formation that block the neurons. That's the reason why we're not able to speak. That's the reason why we're so difficult for the balance. So if we stop the formation of the fibrils, that might be a way to reduce, I would say, the consequence of Alzheimer's disease. Saying that, the main point is when your bloodstream, it has any compounds, any drugs you use, has to cross, this is what we call blood-brain barrier. That's not evident. I must admit that caffeine can do it. That's the reason why you take caffeine, not in very energetic. If you take marijuana, that's really good. That's true. We can say, well, I don't need that to do it. But the point is, small molecule like caffeine, marijuana, cocaine, cross very easily. Other protein, other molecules, small molecule, you want to introduce in the bloodstream so that it crosses the BBB. It does not work at all. That's the reason why you are obliged to introduce your compound into the brain, not from the bloodstream. So that's the reason why our interest was to say, is it possible to bring the carbon dust knowing that inhibits the monomer before to form fibrils? Is it possible to introduce it into the brain? So that's the main point that I'm talking. What do we use? We use zebrafish, and the zebrafish is still there when we use it. So saying that, we have what we call central nervous system here. And the control is no injection. We inject carbon dust. We don't see anything. And when we inject the FITC, which is the fluorescence probe, with the carbon dust, now we see some nearby barrier, but does not cross the barrier. The only way is to use transferrin, and transferrin means that this is a protein that recognizes the BBB and pass through and leave a passage for the rest of the molecule, for the rest of the system. So the system is a dye, transferrin, sequence, and that crosses the blood-brain barrier. This one. So that means that there is a possibility to cross the blood-brain barrier with the carbon dust. Eventually, carbon dust will reduce. That's the idea. Will reduce the formation of fibrils. That's the main idea. And by the way, the fish is still living. What we do is to introduce to the heart the carbon dioxide system, and we can see the bloodstream. In fact, using the dye, we know that there is a bloodstream, and we're able to see this formation, not formation, but the transfer from the bloodstream to the subconverter system. The other application that we're very surprised to see is related to the bone imaging. What I'm saying is we have the control experiments of the blue light excitation when we use 0.5 nanoliter, 5 milligrams per milliliter carbon dioxide to see what we inject into the heart. And by the way, the fish is still living. After 5 days, still happy about what happened. So, saying that, when we inject it to the heart, so we see the bones here of the fish. We really were surprised. What is the reason? Is it due to calcium, the presence of calcium? We have no idea at the moment. We are still working on it. But we have done all the experiments with the biologists to go having another probe to check, but at least to see the bone. To see the bone, it takes at least 1 day, 2 days. With carbon dust, 1 hour to see the bones. So what is the consequence of it? Consequence is we are working in the medical school, and if you have a microfracture in your bones, you will never be able to see it by X-ray or by NMR or by magnetic resonance imaging. It's impossible. But if there was a possibility to see it with carbon dust, and we can, because we have checked it, if we make a crack in the bone, the carbon dust goes into the bone. And the point is, we know that we can, with carbon dust, we can have a specific drug. We can conjugate the carbon dust with a specific drug, so we can repair it. That's the main idea, based on this work that we have done with this innovation. So, saying that carbon dust for dielectric materials, as I said, what I read was mainly related to 2 papers, and these 2 papers, one of them is very good. This is Shreya, that has been published in Royal Society of Chemistry, the advanced one, last year. And as you can see, this is about the same type of preparation. We use citric acid, and amine, instead to use the ethylenediamine with 2-amine, they use a long tail C18 carbon atoms with the amine group, primary amine group. And again, heating at 250, I think this is too high. And this is what we call carbonization, and we can produce carbon dust. So what is the main interest to use the system for the dielectric materials? Well, first of all, when you look the time, responsive time, or switching time with temperature, so we can see that between 30 degrees centigrade at least, there are an increase of 50 and 30% increase when you have this ferroelectric, in fact, liquid crystal used, mixed with 0.05% weight carbon dust or 0.1% weight of carbon dust. We have between 15 and 30% increase at 30 degrees centigrade for this specific experiment. Second, there is no change in the electric, I would say, local field in the system. The present of ions, there is no change in the presence of ions in this ferroelectric system. So that's the first one. We will see later that there is an enhancement in the conductivity and also the ghost tone mode of rotational and viscosity for the carbon dioxide. So the second experiment that they have performed is mainly related to, we have here, the dielectric strength, dielectric strength, sorry, this is delta E. This is related to the permittivity. This is related to the absorption spectrum. This is related to the polarization. So saying that in these three terms, in terms of polarization and also the conductivity, this is for related to the absorption spectrum, and the dielectric strength, all these are increased in terms of dielectric parameters, and they use only two sides of it's a concentration, two concentration, 0.5 and 0.1%. Here for this specific permittivity measurements, the value is 10% increase and 15% increase. Same thing also for the absorption spectrum. And related to the saturated polarization, again, small increase, about 15% when we add these two. What about the effect of the we have the Goldstone mode for the relaxation, and we can see a decrease in this particular case, probably related to this question of change in the conductivity in the system. If you look at the dielectric now strength, as you can see, this linear relationship still increase when we pass from 0.5 to 0.1%. And finally, for the Goldstone mode of the rotational viscosity, again, increase, although this increase of 30 degrees centigrade is about the same for 0.05 and 0.1. And what they find out is if we add more than 0.1%, there is not much change in this system. So, saying that if you look at the conductivity, this is the AC conductivity in terms of the frequency. For low frequency, there is no change. And only from 10 kilohertz, now we can see there is an increase of the conductivity. And probably this is due to the fact that when we change the range of the frequency, so we have an increase of the conductivity of the system. Second, the dipole also interaction might be important in this system. So that's a few results related to dielectric. And as I said, dielectric material is a huge space, I would say, to work with carbon dioxide in the system. There's basically nothing really that has been solved at the moment, but I'm pretty sure they will be solved in the future. In summary, we talk about small gel-like carbon dust that was prepared characterized. The non-toxic carbon dust also were prepared from carbon powder, mainly related to power imaging. And finally, for the special hydrophobic carbon dust in the ferroelectric liquid crystal, I think there is a huge space to have new, I would say, evidence, new nice parameters that will be discovered in the near future. So saying that, this is the group member that has done the work and what I just talked about. We have good collaboration with Isaac Krohn from the Department of Biology and also Julia Dana, and all the XPS measurement has been done with the NC State University. And without funding, it would be very difficult to do this type of research from the NC. So thank you very much.
We'll open the session for questions, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Leblanc. Well, I was really excited to know something that the fluorescent emission wavelength shifts with the excitation. The question is, it shouldn't, in principle, as it measures the bandgap, you know. So maybe with different excitation wavelengths, you'll get a change in the structure. So in such a case, this explains why there was a shift in energy. And one technique be really to test is to see if that change was, for instance, reversible or not. For instance, you move from 500 nanometers, you go down to 350 nanometers, then you go up again and see if you get the same original results. See what I mean? Because if it's a reversible change, that's something to do.
Thank you for your question. First of all, there are two, I would say, models to explain this excitation dependence. I'm thinking about what you suggest. We have done it. We go up to from 300 to 500, going back, same results. The characteristic of carbon dust is really related to emission dependence. What is the way to explain that? There are two ways. One way is to say, when you prepare your carbon dust, you made synthetic, the fluorophore. And when you excite at 350, you excite a specific fluorophore. If you excite at 400, you excite to another fluorophore due to the preparation. That's one explanation. The other explanation is surface state. When you irradiate your sample, you produce an excited electron hole. Another state, electron hole. But our combination is not on the same surface state. This is on the first and the second combined together. That means your emission will be different. Compared to in terms of excitation, the emission will be different. So this is what we call the surface state model. Can we discriminate between the two? We have tried very hard to produce, or at least to see if we can produce fluorescence molecules. We can't. So I am more, I would say, on the side of this question of surface state to explain it.
Your presentation. I have two questions regarding the synthetic approach. Can you please comment on the differences between the hydrogen method and the carbon power method for what concern mainly the yield of the reaction, so the amount of nanoparticle that you can produce in a single reaction, and also on size distribution of carbon dot and also quantum yield.
So the first part related to synthesis, right? So the synthesis, there are many ways to produce it, and the most classical one is to heat it. The heating, so it's fine. But you can use a microwave also. So, and you can also use, thinking about laser ablation. So there are different ways. When you produce a carbon dust, that's the reason I said at the beginning, this is very important to characterize it. Some papers, they have not their own UV bills fluorescent acid. That's not right, because they don't know the size dimension. Because we know that might be due to the size dimension. Now, size dimension for the histogram using AFM or the 10. So we got a value of 4.5 plus or minus 0.5. This is very short histogram that we have.
And so the size distribution can influence the optical properties, in particular the fluorescence?
I think that's a good question, because carbon dust, there is a huge difference. Carbon dust, we won't see the difference. It doesn't reason why there's not very much work that has been done up to now on the theoretical side of it. I would like to see more theory on it, because the explanation I was giving to my colleague, I mean, I don't like it too much. It's not based on the theory. And that's a problem we have at the moment. And nobody is able to explain it really, I would say, in terms of chemistry or physical chemistry of it. This is, I would say, the rudiment is very low in terms of explanation. There is no experimental evidence other than to see excitation wavelength dependent on the emission. That's an experimental fact.
Thank you, Mr. Leblanc. I want to know the type of dielectric rotation.
The type of?
Dielectric rotation.
But this is ferroelectric liquid crystal.
Rotation.
Yeah, this is ferroelectric liquid crystal.
The type.
What do you mean the type?
origin.
No,
Origin, c'est quoi?
you have to read the paper.
Ah oui.
It's good to have a paper. No, I don't remember.
But I know the electric relaxation, classic or relaxation.
This is classic.
Classic.
Oh, classic.
Thank you.
My question?